Hello friends, and welcome back to the Dork Side. I'm the Dork in the Road, and I've owned both a Norden 901 and a Yamaha Tenere 700 for the last 6 months, and today we're going to talk about which is better. I'm the Dork in the Road, and I want to be your internet riding buddy, so please consider subscribing. I have been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to own and ride both a Yamaha Tenere 700 and a Husqvarna Norden 901 for the past 6 months. I actually got them both in the same week. The Tenere was a little bit of a surprise. I have a playlist and videos of the days I got those bikes. All that stuff is in my Norden versus Tenere playlist, so I would encourage you to check that out. So in the 6 months I've had both bikes, I've done a ton of stuff. I've taken them on multi-day camping trips. I've had them on long highway rides. I did the Washington BDR on the Norden 901. I've had the Tenere up to Taiyi Mountain Lookout and a bunch of places off the Washington BDR at the Touratech ride, rode it in the Alvar Desert. Lots of technical abandoned logging roads. I've done some single track on both. I also have a detailed 6-month review on each bike, and I'll link both of those in the description. There will be a few pieces of repeated information, but my focus for this video is twofold. One, how are these two bikes similar and how are they different, right? Because if you're trying to decide between them, that's probably something that you're interested in. And two, who is each bike for? And why would you pick one over the other? First, we'll start with the obvious, and that is, how are these two bikes the same? They have a lot of similarities. They're both mid-size adventure bikes. You know, neither one is a 1250 GS, but they're not dual sports either. I've been continually impressed by both bikes and how they do off-road, but they're both reasonably comfortable on the road. They do fine on the road. That is the point of an adventure bike. They're both fast and fun to ride. They both have a large aftermarket. The Tenere is probably a little better in that department just because it's been out a little longer, but the Norden kind of makes up for it by the fact that a lot of the KTM 890 adventure parts will work on the Norden, so you have a little bit of an advantage there. So there's lots of parts out there. They're both very cool looking bikes, in my opinion. I feel like the Norden is more hit and miss. It's kind of a love it or hate it with the big round headlights and all that, but I've never met anyone that said they thought the Tenere was stupid looking. So they're both good looking bikes if you're into aesthetics, and you know, who isn't? You want to buy a bike that you turn around and look at after you park it, right? You want to love it that much, and I think both of these have that quality. They're both very fun motorcycles to ride. Twisting the throttle, throwing your leg over, they're both going to put a huge grin on your face. There's not one bike that is like super fun and one bike that is like, meh, it's okay. They're both incredibly fun and will take you to incredible places and encourage you to do maybe new things that you wouldn't try normally on a different bike, because they're capable, comforting, and confidence inspiring. They're both capable of carrying all the luggage and gear you need to go out and do your multi-day trips. They both have a fully adjustable suspension. They both have excellent torque and really good low-end control. Like I mentioned, I've had both on ATV trails, both on single track trails, and being able to use the clutch and feather in and out and get the power when you need it to get through those tight kind of technical situations, to get up hills, things like that. And they also have a lot of torque so that if you screw up, you don't have the momentum you need, whatever. The engine's just got more and more and more power whenever you need it to get you out of whatever situation you've gotten yourself into. As long as you can control the power, which is a little bit more of a difficult thing on the Tenere than it is on the Norden for reasons we'll talk about, you can get a lot of power out of these bikes. There's a lot there to save you and basically get you through any situation. So they're both fun bikes. They're both insanely good bikes. If you're wanting me to say that one of them sucks or isn't any good at what it's built for, that's not what this is about, because they're both great. It's very difficult to choose between them, honestly, every time I go out and take a ride. So those are the similarities between the two bikes, kind of a quick and dirty similarities. Let's talk about what each one does better. So the Norden does a lot of things better than the Tenere. The seat is far more comfortable than the Tenere. The stock seat on the Tenere sucks. It is terrible. It is 2x4-esque. It reminds me of a dual sport seat, a dirt bike seat. The Norden seat is so wide and so comfortable. It's definitely one of the most comfortable stock seats I've ever ridden on, just because the width spreads out the weight and makes it super comfortable for long periods of time. But it narrows down at the front so that you can still stand up and do all the off-road technical stuff you need to do. The Norden is far more comfortable on the highway. It's not to say the Tenere is uncomfortable on the highway, but on the Tenere, you definitely know you're riding an off-road bike on the highway, and on the Norden, it just feels like it cruises, man. And for a lot of reasons, except wind protection. The wind protection sucks in stock form on both bikes, but it's just more capable on the highway. It's faster on the highway. It's got more highway-friendly features like cruise control, and it just feels more planted and easier to ride on the highway. So if you're going to spend a lot of time on the highway, the Norden is maybe one to consider. The Norden is faster. Both bikes are quick, but the Norden is fast. Like, I call it piss your pants power, because the first time I got on it and twisted the throttle, I was surprised. I was not prepared for the amount of acceleration that I experienced. And on the Tenere, it's good, linear power delivery. It's very nice, but it's not as fast. The Norden has a lot more horsepower. The Norden is lower to the ground. It's easier to get your feet down and easier to swing your leg over. So if you're vertically challenged, you may struggle more with the Tenere than you will with the Norden. I definitely feel more secure on the Norden. I can get the balls of both feet down, and often my heels The seat height is not that different on paper, but when you sit on it and ride it, it is so much easier to get your feet down. And people worry that because it's so wide that that's not going to be the case, and I can tell you, no, the Tenere, it's way harder to get my feet down. I constantly feel like I'm missing that last half inch before the ground on the Tenere. I don't feel that way on the Norden. I feel like I can always get my feet down. And I have a 30-inch inseam for reference. The center of gravity on the Norden is a lot lower owing to all the fuel tank weight being down low. That makes it feel less heavy when you're up and riding around. There are a lot of advantages to that. The Norden weighs more, something like 20 or 30 pounds more wet, but you don't feel it as much once you're moving because of that low down center of gravity that's compared to the Tenere's really high center of gravity where the fuel tank is up on top of an already very tall engine that makes the Tenere a little bit more tippy. That is not a deal breaker, but you do notice the difference. The big difference on the Norden is gadgetry, is electronics. It has traction control, it has cruise control, it has various ABS settings, it has a user configurable mode if you get Explorer mode. It has all of the things, it does a lot of work for you. It's a bike that is very easy to ride because it smooths out your mistakes. I've said multiple times it feels like a cheat code in a video game, and I mean that to this day. That is what it feels like when I get on the motorcycle. It's like you're turning on assists in a driving game. You can screw up and throw it into the corner and give it a big handful of throttle on gravel and it's going to catch you. It's got lean sensitive ABS and lean sensitive traction control. It is just electronics through the roof on this bike. It does a lot of work and thinking for you. So it makes you a better rider at the expense of you not learning any more skills. The tires are tubeless on the Norden, which is a big deal if you're out in the bush. You get a flat. It sure is nice to be able to plug it instead of having to take the tire all the way off and put a new tube in or patch the tube. You have to do that with the Tenere. Back to the modes, just the off-road mode in particular on the Norden, I just can't believe how intuitive it is. I've raved about this in my review, but I did the entire Washington BDR. That is 5 days of off-road riding. I never took it out of off-road mode once. It knew when I wanted to break the rear end loose. It knew when the traction was iffy and I needed the power to be cut so that I could not spin the wheel. It knew when I was trying to goose it and go over a jump. It just knows what I'm trying to do in a super intuitive way, and that shocks me because a lot of people don't like all these modes because they want to be in control and they don't trust the computer to make the right decision. But time and time again, that computer made the right decision for me. As an intermediate rider, I'm no expert rider, but it made me a better rider. It made the trip easier. And the same on the street. Like, you put it in street mode. One of my favorite things is to push that thing as hard as I can into twisties and see if I can get the traction control to kick in, because it just makes me ride harder, because it saves me. Even on those knobbies, the traction control is going to kick in before I ever slide that rear end out in low side. So it is just so fun to push it as hard as you can because the computer just seems to know what is up. And the other big advantage, and this will shock you, to the Norden is the oil change intervals are twice as long. So it's 4,000 miles on the Tenere and 9,300 miles on the Norden. Now, I don't advise going that long. You know, I would probably change it yearly or at 4,000 miles, whichever comes first, obviously. Maybe even every 6 months because these engines are a little bit more sensitive. But man, even that on paper is shocking to me. Shocking. Those are all the areas in which the Norden excels, where the Norden is better than the Tenere. Let's talk about the places where the Tenere is better than the Norden, and there are many. It is a cheaper bike. Bottom line is important. MSRP for a Tenere is less than $11,000. MSRP on a Norden is $14,000, okay? That is like 30% higher. That's a lot more money. If getting the maximum value for your dollar is what you're after, you cannot beat the Tenere. I've said in my review, it is maybe the best value in off-road motorcycling. Or if you're on a tight budget and you want to have money left over for new tires, which I recommend. I don't like the stock tires on either of these, unless you're going to be on the road most of the time. Luggage, crash bars, new exhaust, stuff like that. The Tenere is going to get you farther with that stuff. So price does matter, especially when one bike is not significantly more capable than the other. And in this case, it isn't. They'll go to the same places and do the same things. It's a simpler bike. I just talked about all those modes and the traction control and the ABS and the off-road mode and all that on the Norden. Tenere has none of that. Tenere has an ABS switch that's on and off, so you got that minimum level of safety on the highway, but you're in full control of the motorcycle, particularly when you turn that off. For some, that's an advantage. If you're coming from a dual sport with none of those bells and whistles, you're going to feel right at home on a Tenere. If you're coming from a street bike with a lot of bells and whistles, you may want to go with the Norden because it's going to be a whole different experience. So if you want a motorcycle, the whole motorcycle, and nothing but a motorcycle experience, the Tenere is the way to go. The Norden is a whole nother level. The Tenere is a lot narrower. It is taller, it is top heavier, sort of, but I'm talking about, one, in feeling. When you sit on the thing, it feels very narrow. When you sit on the Norden, it feels very wide. But also on the trail, I've banged my crash bars up against stuff a ton of times on the Norden, thinking I can fit through that on a single track trail, but I can't because the bike is super wide. Tenere not so, and particularly not so down low. So a narrower, easier to maneuver bike in tight spaces is the Tenere. A big one, depending on who you are, and a big obvious elephant in the room is reliability. The CP2 engine that Yamaha puts in the Tenere is statistically one of the most reliable engines of all time. Cannot say that about the Norden based on the KTM 890 platform. The Nordens have a bunch of known issues. They have quirks and random things that happen that they're always in the back of my mind as an owner. I'm always wondering which one is going to crop up. You know, I've had issues. I had the radiator hose leakage issue. I've had the electronics forgetting my settings issue, but on the Yamaha, there's none of that. You don't have any issues at all. You know that when you put the key in and turn it and hit that button, that bike is going to start and go. And so if that dead simple, don't have to think about it, reliability is something you're interested in, can't beat the Yamaha. You just can't. The dealer network for the Yamaha, speaking of reliability and times you may need a little help, is far superior to what the Husqvarna dealerships and even the KTM dealerships have. So if you need service or you need help out there on your travels, there are 873 Yamaha motorcycle dealerships in the United States of America, as an example. May be different where you live. I know some of you are in Europe, but all I have is my perspective, and this is it. Compared to 198 Husqvarna motorcycle dealerships. So there are over 4 times as many Yamaha dealerships. And even if you throw in the KTM dealerships, there are 347 KTM motorcycle dealerships in the United States, some of which overlap. There are a lot of Husky/KTM dealerships. So you're probably looking at 500 dealerships total-ish. So that's almost twice as many for the Yamaha. You're almost twice as likely to be able to find a nearby Yamaha dealership than you are to be able to find a Husky or a KTM dealership. That's not insignificant. The exhaust note on the Tenere, oh my God, it's just, chef's kiss. Stock exhausts are not supposed to sound good. They don't sound good. But that bike, I could record it and play it on repeat and go to sleep to it. It is, as I said in my review, the soundtrack to your adventures, and it is one of the best ones there are. It's not obnoxiously loud, but when you twist that throttle, the grunt is amazing. I love it. It's fantastic. The suspension on the Tenere is better. It feels better to me. They're both fully adjustable, like I mentioned, but I have bottomed out the suspension on the Norden more than once. It has a reputation for being a little squishier. It's not as capable as the 890 Adventure R suspension. It's kind of below that. At least in my experience, the Tenere suspension has been better, stiffer, more responsive, and more progressive, actually. The Norden has the longer oil change intervals, but the maintenance intervals on the Tenere are far better than on the Norden. The first valve check on the Tenere is 26,000 miles. It's like 26.6. It's actually almost 27,000 miles. On the Norden, you're supposed to get them checked at 15,000. That's still a lot of riding. That's a year or two or more for most people, but it's a lot longer on the Tenere, and probably the people that are having those checked, the damn thing is just in spec and it doesn't even need to be looked at. The Tenere engine's also a lot less finicky. There's just sort of a reputation with the 890 motors. The air intake isn't great on the 890s and the Nordens, and they can sometimes let dirt in, which is a big problem. That's why I had to get a power plate, a Rottweiler Performance power plate for my Norden to prevent that and increase some airflow. So little things like that too. And one of my favorite things of the Tenere is that it is obviously purpose-built for off-road performance. Not that the Norden isn't, but it's based on an off-road bike. It's based on the 890 Adventure R, and then they made some concessions, it seems like, to make it more touring friendly, to make it more road friendly, but keep most of the off-road performance. But a perfect example of what I mean in terms of purposeful off-road design is that anti-squat feature that is built into the engineering of the Tenere 700. It's built from the ground up for maximum off-road performance, and then road performance is an afterthought. So if you want a bike that's really good on the road and is also pretty good off-road, the Norden is the way to go. If you want a bike that is as good as possible off-road, but also okay, tolerable on the road, Tenere is what that is. That's what it was designed to be. That's a difference in the design philosophy between those two bikes, in my opinion and experience. So the biggest differences between these two bikes, in my opinion, issues and reliability concerns. The Norden has a ton of known issues. There's the radiator hose thing. There's the rear shock failure. There is the air intake issue. There is the electronics for getting your settings. There's a ton of things that people are having crop up with these bikes, and admittedly, it's overblown. I really do think it is. I'm in a Norden owners group, and they did a survey, and 10%-ish of people have had an issue that's required dealership intervention or parts or something to fix it. That's pretty high, but it's not insanely every bike, if I get a bike, it's gonna fail like it's been made out to be. So just keep that in mind. The failure rate is probably higher. You probably are gonna have to deal with something if you buy a Norden, and you may not have to deal with anything ever with a Tenere, and that is a big difference. Now, what that does to your state of mind is an important consideration. If that makes it so that you can't ever relax relax and enjoy the bike and trust it because you know that there are sometimes issues, then maybe the Tenere is the way to go. If you want a bike that you know that you don't have to ever think about, if you forget to do an oil change, it's probably okay. You know, it's not only dead simple reliable, but it's also okay to maybe forget the maintenance as often as you should or as you're supposed to. The Tenere will run forever, and it's an apocalypse bike. The Norden is gonna need your attention. Basically, if this was a romantic comedy, the Norden is the high maintenance city girlfriend, and the Tenere is the wholesome, easygoing girl next door. The Norden feels and looks huge. It feels like a bigger motorcycle until you're moving. That's one of the biggest differences, is the way the bike feels when you sit on it. The Tenere feels like a tall, heavy dual sport. The Norden feels like a street bike that's tall and can go off-road. The electronics, biggest difference, one of the biggest differences between the two bikes, so many ride modes. They do a lot of the work for you on the Norden, and it can smooth out your mistakes. So I'm a better rider on the Norden because I can push it hard without worrying about screwing up. But the Tenere is the bike that pushes me to improve my skills and become a better rider and need those aids less. So it's just kind of what you want to do. That's an important distinction to me, I think. The Norden, for some reason, makes me ride like an asshole. I covered this in my review video, but when I'm behind someone on a bike that I know is that fast, particularly on the street, I just want to pass them. So I pass people, I pass multiple people, I ride way too fast on that bike. That's not to say that the Tenere isn't fast. I would say the Tenere is quick and the Norden is fast. And fast makes me want to ride fast on the street. Quick makes me want to go do dumb stuff in the woods. If that makes sense in your head, then it's a consideration. If you're like, what are you talking about? You probably don't need to worry about it. And the Tenere feels top heavy and tippy-ish. And the Norden has a much lower center of gravity, so it's easier to kind of move around and doesn't feel as tippy. But I'm telling you, people make that out to be a huge deal, and it isn't. I mean, that difference is negligible. I have to think about it to notice it. The Norden's easier to pick up because it lands on the fuel pods and doesn't go flat up against the ground. We don't spend most of our time on the ground, or at least I hope we don't, so that's a minor consideration. So those are the similarities and the differences between the two bikes. And the other thing I said I wanted to address is, who are these bikes for? The Norden is for the rider who is not afraid to ride fast and hard. It's for the person who wants the maximum performance and the best bike out there, but understands that that performance comes with a cost. More maintenance, reliability questions, more expensive, things like that. It is better in a lot of ways. It has more features, it's more feature rich, but to get those things you have to pay a lot more money. So the value for the Norden is lower, but the total package is more valuable. There's more there. The Norden is for someone who's okay with a limited dealer network. Someone who wants to spend more time on the road because it's got cruise control and better comfort. Someone with more money to spend, let's be honest, that's a big contributing factor. You don't buy a KTM motorcycle on a budget. People, it's just not a thing unless you buy an old used one and work on it yourself. Someone who wants modes and gadgets, either because they think they're cool, like me, I just love gadgets and technology, or because you need them. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. You don't have the time to go out and practice. You don't want to spend a bunch of time drilling. You only ride sometimes, and you want a bike that's going to do a lot of the work for you, keep you from making a big mistake, enable you to ride as hard and fast and fun as possible without having to spend a lot of time building skills. The Norden is a better bike for you. Someone who doesn't mind tinkering with a bike or worrying about potential issues, if that's you, the Norden might be a better choice. If you're a shorter rider or someone who values being able to get your feet down, if that's a high priority for you, you're gonna feel more comfortable on the Norden. I kind of feel like the Norden is better for people who are coming from street bikes or touring bikes over to the off-road world because it feels more street bikey to me than the Tenere. Now, there's a caveat there. I do not think you should jump on a big adventure bike like this to start riding off-road. I think everyone should buy a dual sport, a TW200 or a CRF 250L or even a DRZ, learn on that and then get your big adventure bike because it's a whole different animal and the mistakes are a lot less costly on a dual sport. But if you're a street rider thinking of converting to some off-road, you're probably going to feel more comfortable on the Norden. And the Norden is for someone who wants maximum performance and a safety net and doesn't mind the bike doing some of the riding for them and has the money to spend. So the Tenere, however, is for a different type of person. The Tenere is for someone who wants a bike that's made to excel off-road and doesn't mind that it's less comfortable on the road. If you want a purpose-built off-road motorcycle that can kind of go on road too, but the focus is on the off-road, I would say the Tenere is more of a 70 off-road, 30 on-road, and the Norden is more of a 50-50. The Tenere is the bike for you. If you value reliability or peace of mind and don't want to have to think about your motorcycle while you're riding it, the Tenere is better. If you have less money to spend, you can get a lot more value for your dollar, have a lot more money left over if you buy a Tenere. If you value simplicity, if you don't want a bunch of ride modes and a bunch of complicated settings, you don't want to have to learn menus and navigate menus on the fly while you're riding, you don't want to have to stop every time you go off the pavement, switch to off-road mode and switch your ABS around. You want to just keep riding simple, fun, the Tenere is a better bike for you. If you don't want to do maintenance, you don't like maintenance, you don't want to think about maintenance, you want a bike that just goes every time you ride it, you don't want to spend a bunch of time working on it, you want to know that that bike is never going to be in the shop, the Tenere is a better bike for you. If you want a motorcycle, a whole motorcycle, and nothing but a motorcycle, the Tenere is a better bike for you. If you are a dual sport rider moving over to adventure bikes, so you've been riding dual sports and you want to move up to more highway touring, longer rides, the Tenere is going to feel right at home to you. And the bottom line for the Tenere is for someone who wants to ride the bike, hone your skills, and feel like they're in total control. And the Norden does some of the work for you. The Tenere gives you the opportunity to be in control of every single thing that's happening. That's not to say you can't turn the ride modes off on the Norden. You can. Why spend the extra money and turn all that stuff off? So the bottom line, ultimately, these two bikes are similar enough. They do all the same things. You can really make your decision based on which one feels right when you test ride it. People always ask me, which bike should I get? And I always say, ride them both. If one feels better, get that one. Or get the one you can get the better deal on. Is there a hard and fast champion here? No, because they both do the same thing. There's nothing I would do on one bike that I wouldn't do on the other. That includes long distance rides, that includes tight single track, that includes everything. They're both good at both things. They're both great bikes. The differences between them are minimal. If the feel is not enough for you, make your decision based on how much money you have to spend or which one you can find. They're both so difficult to find right now. You're not giving up any off-road capability buying the Tenere over the Norden. What you're giving up is bells and whistles, creature comforts, cruise control, things like that. If road performance is a priority, get the Norden. If all you care about is off-road and riding on the road is a minor consideration, then the Tenere might be a better bike for you. Think about it this way. The Norden is a Ferrari. Bells, whistles, maximum exotic performance, but more maintenance, more expensive, and you have the concerns of reliability. The Tenere is a dead simple muscle car. Simple, reliable, predictable, but skill is required to make it do what you want it to do. It can technically go as fast as the Ferrari in the hands of the right driver, but you have to be a skilled driver to get there. Ferrari will do some of the work for you. The good news is they're both amazing bikes, and you can't go wrong either way. It may seriously come down to which you can find. Good luck, happy shopping. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you've owned either or both of these bikes, please leave that in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience and your feeling about the difference between the two bikes. But for now, and as always, I just want to say thank you very much for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!
How was that video half an hour long? Also, I can't turn the camera off.